Daniel Orozco asks if it's truly possible to know other people. I discuss this and more on today's episode. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I've found in my travels. Today it is Short Story Tuesday, so I wanted to focus on a short story of interest. Today's short story is all about three people dealing with love and life, and it's told in a very strange way. I am referring to Only Connect by Daniel Orozco, which comes from his short story collection Orientation, which was published in 2011. Very interesting book cover here with all these cartoon characters. Weird faces and such. But for those who don't know, Daniel Orozco is a Nicaraguan American writer who has been writing since the 90s. He mostly got his work published in various journals, writing short stories and whatnot. I believe he teaches at a university, and he only has like one or two short story collections published. And one of them is this one, Orientation, which I found at my local library. Don't forget to patronize your local libraries. They might have some very interesting short story collections like this one. And it should also be noted that these short stories were ones that were also published in other journals, so just a collection. I don't know if he has any actual books, novels, stuff like that he's written, but I would be very interested in reading those if I could ever find it. And so without further ado, let's talk about Only Connect. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So Only Connect focuses on three separate characters, transitioning between them in very interesting ways. It begins by focusing on Bennett. He's been walking home after a party, he's been drinking, and he's being followed by two people that we don't know initially what their motives are. At the party, he was flirting, or trying to flirt, get to know this woman that he works with a bit more. He's interested in her, but they've only had a couple of conversations. And she begins flirting with him at the party, which he's confused about. But he quickly realizes that she's using him to get at another person, to make that person mad. And he feels very betrayed by that, and he leaves the party. He's followed by those two people, and as he's getting to his car, which isn't good because he's been drinking, don't drink and drive, those two people reveal themselves to be muggers who are trying to get money from him. And he's like, "What are you going to do? Are you going to shoot me?" And one of the muggers does, in fact, shoot him in the stomach twice, which seems to kill him. The story then sort of transitions to one of the muggers, a man named Costas, who it's revealed that they've mugged him because they wanted money for drugs. They are either doing the drugs or they're dealing the drugs. It's not quite clear, I think. But Costas is with the other mugger, a young man who he refers to as the boy. They are in a sexual relationship going around the country, but also Washington State, trying to score drugs or deal drugs, and engaging in a number of shenanigans in the process. The young boy is particularly wild and engaging in risky behavior. A little bit annoying to Costas, but Costas still likes to keep him around because he's in love with him. Eventually, the young man beats him up a little bit because of something that he had. But when he returns later and Costas just accepts him, even though the young man broke his arm, which sort of highlights the entirety of their relationship there. And the story kind of focuses on that aspect of them while they're still hanging around the dying Bennett. Costas gets their credit cards and whatnot, and then as they're turning to walk away, they see a woman with groceries watching them. She has apparently seen the whole thing, and a tub of ice cream drops from her grocery bags, to which the young boy helps her and picks it up. Costas realizes that she's seen their faces, but they decide to leave and let it be. even though the woman could possibly turn them in. Although Costas thinks like if he turns around and he sees her again, he's going to shoot her. But when he does that, he doesn't see her. The story then transitions, interestingly, to Hailey, the woman who had the ice cream, as she runs home and is thankful to be alive. Doesn't really tell the police, but it's clear that the death of this man and the young boy, or the young man in particular, is of interest to her. She's just thankful to be alive. And it's revealed that she's a paralegal. She's kind of in a relationship with her another lawyer at a law firm, the same law firm she works at. He has a family, though, a wife and children. He doesn't really acknowledge the relationship apart from when they're together having sex and whatnot. And Hailey's very interested in him, but again, she's not getting that contact that she wants because the guy's trying to hide the relationship. And this goes on for some time. Eventually, the lawyer dies, and his son takes his place in the law firm. And the son just says to her that after she becomes a great paralegal, he says that she, that his father liked her. Doesn't really specify what, but she feels validated knowing that he clearly thought of her enough to talk about her outside of work and whatnot. Eventually, she is able to enter another relationship with a woman, and they are content together, although it does appear that she dies, and Hailey grows older, but thinks about the positive aspects of love there, even though she only had it for a brief period of time. And as the story comes to a close, she remembers the young man who shot Bennett, a man she knew nothing about all those years ago, and again, she's thankful to be alive, and that's where the story ends there. In terms of analysis, there is quite a bit worth talking about with Only Connect. It's a very fascinating story that focuses on these three characters, and one of the things that Orozco does pretty well here is he utilizes the switching between protagonists throughout the story. He jumps to the three characters and tells their story as they transition from what happens to one person to another. It's something that I've often thought about in telling stories. Like, wouldn't it be interesting if you made a movie or wrote a book this way? Never capitalized on it, but it turns out someone else kind of thought about it before me. And I'm pretty sure other people have thought about it, but this is the first time I've really seen it happen in a serious way in a story. What's interesting is that each character's life is unknowable to the previous person. You can talk to them, you can find out a little bit about them, but you can't really know someone else, I think is what Orozco's point is here. There's even a fascinating quote that I would like to read to you from this. But between his conversations with her, she had a life all her own, and before them, an entire history he was not a part of. You can't know anybody, not really, not in the brief overlaps of flimsy acquaintance, nor in any of the tenuous and fleeting opportunities for connection that we are afforded. And that's a really fascinating quote, sort of like the underlying premise of the story, the underlying sort of thesis, I would say, in a way, where, again, like each character's life is unknowable. You can't really get to know them apart from like brief glances at their life, and even then, you're only seeing what's on the surface. You're not seeing what's below there. And so, in using these three characters, Bennett, Hailey, and Costas, what's fascinating is that Orozco is saying you can't know them, but like the only way that we see these people's lives overlapping is through the connection. Only connect. It's the title of the story. I think it's fascinating. It's sort of like people's lives don't really blend together enough for them to know each other. They only connect in this sort of way. It's an answer to a question that Orozco is posing in the story, and it's just fascinating how he does it. But in these transitions, it's very fascinating as well because you see a lot of depth to these characters' lives, like brief summaries, but enough for you to understand what they're all about. Bennett, he's being jaded by this woman at work, maybe hasn't found love, and it also makes questionable decisions in choosing to drive home drunk. Costa is in love with this young man that he's found. They seem like a good match for each other and that they're both willing to engage in a lot of debauchery. But this young boy is clearly a dangerous person as well, and is like Costas overlooking that, maybe to the detriment later. And then Hailey is struggling to find love in her life. She eventually does, but it's only brief. And so she feels she's been a little bit passed over, but she's still thankful to be alive, especially after that murder that she witnessed in what I would call her youth. So you see a lot of depth to these characters, and you see a lot of similar concerns about love with Bennett, with the person who was using him in that flirting moment, Costa and the young man that he's fallen in love with, and Hailey in the lawyer that's kind of having an affair with her, and the other woman that she found later in life that provided some happiness for her, if for a brief time. And so, even though these people are different and they can't really know each other, there is some connection there with love, which I find to be fascinating. And ultimately, I do think it is bold storytelling on Orozco's part to sort of tell a story about these three people and show that their lives are different, but also very similar, but also that they couldn't really understand each other if they tried, or they couldn't even guess at what the other person's life is like, because again, like, you can't really know people, as Orozco is pointing out. I don't necessarily agree with that all the time, but I do think it's an interesting sort of statement that he's making in this story. Another fascinating aspect of the story is the stream of consciousness writing. I don't normally like stream of consciousness. For the most part, I feel like it drags down a story, makes it kind of like, it kind of feels like the story is just meandering when you do stream of consciousness, and it takes a really talented writer to pull it off, which I've encountered before. I feel like a number of writers have done it well, and including Orozco here. Orozco's writing is hyper specific, and it resembles the thought process. Again, like, people think meanderingly, you're going to end up with something like this, but it ends up being like how characters are thinking, and their internal sort of monologues of what they're dealing with. And people jump from different ideas at times, and it does come in a bit funny here, and I'll explain why in a little bit. But there is a lot of detail for the characters' lives, a lot of sort of in-depth exploration, as I said before, but really focusing on different aspects and what characters are really noting, what they're dealing with in that moment. Allow me to read you another interesting quote from this. Every 4 weeks or so, they made a run to Pasco or Yakima, or as far south as Ashland if they had to. But Astoria was their favorite. Yakima was touch and go these days. The town had gone all fancy and upscale with the winery boom. There were too many strangers and the supply was not always steady. And Pasco was just a fucking chore. The Mexicans they dealt with were quarrelsome and ill-tempered. They enjoyed needling the kid, Maricone this, Maricone that, and got a kick out of it when he invariably flared up and Costas had to settle him down. But Astoria was steady and mellow. The connection in Astoria was tranquilo. They always looked forward to that run. Costas drove, and the kid would stuff the CD changer with Led Zeppelin, slapping John Bonham's drum work on the dashboard and screaming the lyrics out the open window into the rushing night. And this just goes on and on and on. That's just one paragraph there. And that's really like a good sort of example of what the rest of the story looks like in these like 14 or so pages. Just the various thoughts that the characters are having and exploration into the life they're leading. And it's a level of detail that not a lot of other writers would go through, and so it comes off as a bit funny at times. Not enough to sink the story, but like to talk about such detail about characters, like we probably don't need to know this much, but it is appreciated by me to get that level of detail. It really makes the story feel lively and rich, I would say. But it also highlights that this is a level of details that those other characters would never know about one specific character. Like Bennett's not going to know about Costas' life. Costa's not going to know about Hailey's life, and Hailey's not going to know about their lives. And it really just goes back to Orozco's earlier point that you can't truly know about somebody. You can only understand the connection that you have made with them, such as Bennett being robbed by Costa and Hailey witnessing that murder take place. They can't really possibly understand anything else about that person's life. Now, whether or not you agree with that, that's another point, but I do think Orozco is being very specific and very exact in what he's trying to say with this story, and the stream of consciousness does kind of help here. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Only Connect by Daniel Orozco. A very fascinating short story. I was not expecting it to be so sort of, experimental, so powerful, I think, so, stand out in this way. I've read a couple of other short stories from this collection already too. It's really good, especially the titular story, Orientation, which is just one person sort of introducing another to the workplace and sort of talking about different characters. Again, because you might not be able to understand their inner lives, like you can only talk about them from the outside, and that's maybe a little bit misleading. But it's a certain interesting it's an interesting way of viewing the world, I think, and one that maybe not a lot of other writers really consider as they're writing. So yeah, I definitely recommend it to you out there. Go find this book at your local library. Consider purchasing it. Hopefully, maybe if more people buy it, Daniel Orozco will write another book, and we'll find more of his work out there. But maybe he's more interested in teaching or something like that. I don't really know. But yeah, I definitely recommend this. If you have any thoughts, let me know in the comments below. Would love to hear from you. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that other people can find out about this short story, this book, or the author. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and tragic mugging-based travels. Farewell.